When asked about Mario's best games, I'm sure most of us have great memories with titles such as Super Mario Bros. 3, the Galaxy series, or newer titles like Super Mario Bros. Wonder. But many people tend to forget about a series that brought Mario to portable systems, Super Mario Land. Not only are these 3 games some of Mario's most unique adventures, they also introduced Wario, who would become Mario's garlic-munching arch-nemesis, and who also spawned several highly influential series of his own. Let's take a trip down memory lane and look at this outstanding series. My first experience of the original Super Mario Land dates back all the way to my early teen years, way after its original release and long after the rise of the internet. Back when Brentoflaws released his music video about the game Super Mario Land with lyrics. After that, I had to check it out for myself, and I immediately fell in love with the game, despite the fact that it was made more than 20 years before I was even born. Being one of the few launch titles for the original Game Boy back in '89, this game was a technical marvel at the time of its release. It was also developed by a different team at Nintendo, without the involvement of Shigeru Miyamoto, something that would go on to really reflect in its design ethos. For one, Mario departs from the Mushroom Kingdom for the first time. This time we're taken to the kingdom of Sarasa Land. Bowser and Peach are also missing. Mario instead fights the alien Tatanga to save Princess Daisy. The only familiar faces Mario meets in his adventure are Goombas and Koopas, who mysteriously explode now. On his way through this new land, Mario is met with many new and unique areas based on real-world locations. He travels through Egypt, Easter Island, China, and even to the Bermuda Triangle, where he beams around the levels using his UFO. Each world is unique and comes with tons of challenges. There's something new in every single level here. Mario encounters anything from flying heads, rolling boulders, falling platforms in Egyptian tombs, Chinese dancers, and he even gets to fly an airplane through the sky. The creativity and inspiration on display here is really through the roof, and this gives the game a super unique charm and makes it incredibly fun to play. It's a great start to the style that would define the series going forward, as the titles to come after it would only add onto it with even crazier and more outlandish ideas. But this new direction also meant that Mario would fall into quite a few pitfalls along the way. On one hand, due to the limitations in place on the Game Boy, the game was exceptionally short. Each world only has 3 levels, and a playthrough from start to finish might not even take you a single hour. Despite this, the game can still be rather difficult, especially since there's no saving, and getting a game over might send you right back to the title screen if you haven't scored enough points, forcing you to restart all over again. Mario also feels quite different here than he does in his adventures on the NES. In Super Mario Land, he's a lot more slippery and his jumps are often hard to predict, making certain parts rather frustrating for no reason. Mario also lacks many of his abilities he's come to know thus far. His only power-ups here are the mushroom and the so-called Super Balls, which are essentially a variation of the Fire Flower. Instead of shooting in an arch though, this new flower shoots metal balls that bounce around objects. They're a little awkward to use at first, but once you figure it out, you can land really cool trick shots on enemies you otherwise couldn't reach. At the end of Worlds 2 and 4, Mario also gets to board a submarine and airplane respectively, turning the game into a side-scrolling shooter. These levels are a great breath of fresh air to Mario's normal platforming antics and add a lot to the variety of the game. The game also throws 4 unique bosses at the player, something the main series was still lacking in during this time. The final boss, Tatanga the Alien, was especially cool. The battle against him is a crazy shootout all the way up in space. Nowadays though, the game is mostly remembered for its absolutely stellar soundtrack. Like the game itself, it's quite short but well worth a listen. Especially the game's ending is a total classic. As expected, Mario gets to save the princess in the end, and they drive off into the sky, happily ever after. Or at least that's what it seems like, until a certain guest comes along to ruin Mario's day. Super Mario Land 2 opens with Mario's castle, which I guess he just has now, being infiltrated by a totally new character, Wario. We now know him as the garlic-chugging, money-hungry nemesis to Mario, but this is where his story first began. But we'll see much more of him in the next entry. For now, he simply stays a villain for Mario to defeat. But Wario isn't the only thing that's new in this entry, far from it in fact. As Super Mario Land 2 introduces a bunch of new features and improvements from the first game. For one, the game's graphics are much better. The sprites are not only bigger, but also more expressive, allowing the game's charm to shine much more. The game uses the Game Boy's abilities to a much better effect. Mario also controls a lot better than in Super Mario Land, and has some added abilities like the spin jump from Super Mario World. He also gets his iconic Fire Flower back, as well as a totally new addition, the bunny ears. These allow Mario to glide through the air slowly, making it much easier to find secret levels and allowing you to avoid obstacles in your path. Unfortunately, this also has the effect of allowing you to cheese many levels in the game. Super Mario Land 2's titular 6 coins are hidden by Wario in the 6 levels that Mario must conquer to retake his castle. Fortunately for him, this time around he gets to choose when to do which levels. As this game features a somewhat open world with its own overworld map. Here Mario can pick and replay levels at will, play the slot machine, as well as play some optional courses. This gives the player a lot of freedom to approach the game as they see fit, and adds a lot to its easygoing atmosphere overall. Each zone is also beautifully and thematically designed. Mario traverses a huge pumpkin, shrinks down to a tiny size to explore his own garden full of ants, and he even travels to space, and more. Each level in a world is also thematically interesting, and this is where this game's creativity really shines. Much like the first entry, Super Mario Land 2 never lets the player get too bored or comfortable with a concept, as each level takes Mario through a completely new scenario. My favorite example of this would be the Pumpkin Zone, where Mario starts off exploring a castle haunted by enemies straight out of Friday the 13th, continuing into a haunted graveyard where you must escape Japanese yokai, a traditional Super Mario ghost house, only to find himself right in the potion laboratory of an evil witch. Each zone also comes with many new foes that Mario must take on. These span anywhere from ants in a garden to moon piggies that shoot cannonballs at him. This variety of cool and often bizarre ideas shapes this game's identity and sets it clear apart from being just Super Mario on the Game Boy. And rather, this title is where the series started to really become its own thing. In its level design, the game continues to be clever and unique along with its themes, as Mario faces many new obstacles every time. There's claw machines that take him over spiky pits, sticky tree sap he can jump within, a level that plays in moon gravity, and even some free-floating sections in space or inside a sleeping hippo's snot bubble. Furthermore, levels in Super Mario Land 2 are very open and often contain secondary paths, leading to items or secret exits. The game encourages players to explore its levels, which now also scroll vertically, adding onto the game's freedom of movement even more. If players find the many secret exits hidden throughout the game's worlds, they're often rewarded with fun and unique hidden levels. At the end of each world, Mario is once again tasked with defeating a whole slew of bosses. And while these are both interesting and very unique, even bringing back a familiar face from the first game, they often lack in difficulty. In general, due to its open-endedness, Super Mario Land 2 fails to really ever increase in its difficulty, and the platforming never really becomes tighter or harder, which can cause the later levels to feel quite stagnant. Despite this, the final level does present quite the challenge and introduces many cool and difficult mechanics, especially in the fight against Wario. After traversing Mario's castle, which Wario is now plastered with his own face covering every single brick, he finds Wario lurking in the throne room. Wario is unique and uses Mario's very own power-ups against him. After all 3 phases are beaten, Wario transforms into a little goblin version, crying and throwing his shoes at Mario before running away. This time, there's no princess to save though, but Mario does gain the castle back nonetheless. Super Mario Land 2 stood out a lot to me when I was younger. It's incredibly creative and unique, and Wario, one of Mario's most infamous rivals, gets quite the fitting introduction here. It also features an incredible soundtrack that sets a great mood for all of its wacky worlds. Lots of branching paths and hidden levels make the game a joy to explore, and I think it remains one of Mario's best games, sadly one that doesn't get really appreciated the way it deserves anymore. After being kicked out of Mario's castle though, Wario isn't even close to giving up on his journey to take other people's stuff. This time around, he gets his own adventure all to himself. In Super Mario Land 3, also fittingly titled Wario Land, Mario is nowhere to be seen. Instead, we play as Wario, who's on the lookout for a new place to call his own. And after hearing about a certain Princess Peach statue which had recently gone missing, figures it might sell for a hefty sum if he finds it first. So our smelly plumber sets out to Kitchen Island, hoping to get rich in the process. Wario Land immediately sets itself sternly apart from the two games which precede it, doing away with most of Mario's signature style for a more Wario-themed experience. For one, the game takes a much more slow, laid-back approach to platforming. Wario himself controls a good bit different from his red rival as well. Wario is much slower, nor can he defeat enemies via jumps, which merely stun Wario's foes. To defeat them, Wario has to ram them or pick them up to throw them into other enemies. The game also allows you to be a little more crafty, as defeating enemies in creative ways, such as through their level obstacles, is often rewarded with much more coins. More on those later. Wario's toolkit doesn't end there though, as he also gets 3 totally unique power-ups. Eating garlic, his favorite treat, allows Wario to become much stronger, hold onto ceilings, and even do a ground pound. Wario also gets access to a dragon head that spits fire and defeats enemies with ease, and a jet cap that lets him soar through the air for a short time. Each power-up is well integrated into the game and allows Wario to access many areas he otherwise could not. But he must be careful not to take damage from enemies, as this will turn him into Mini Wario, who can't ram and will die from enemies if hit again. Wario's much bigger toolset is contrasted with the game's much simpler level design. Not only is the game's pacing much slower, levels are also built up much simpler than we're used to from Mario's courses. Here's where a hero's search for treasure comes into play. Most levels in the game hold alternative pathways for Mario to tread down, rewarding him with valuable coins or power-ups, and many even containing secret treasures. They're often hidden in far-off locations, encouraging players to explore the levels on their own terms and experiment with the game's mechanics. Some of these can get quite clever, my favorite being in Parsley Woods, where after draining the lake, Wario must backtrack to the level before, where he's now able to explore a whole new area that leads him to the secret treasure. Others require Wario to use specific power-ups to clear level obstacles, or speed through levels to get the key in time, and so much more. Exploring and discovering the depths of each level really makes this game feel much more deep and interesting, especially since each level's main route is usually rather simple. Finding as many of these treasures is quite important too, as coins take a major role in Wario's adventure. They don't give you extra lives this time, instead Wario must pay with coins to use checkpoints and level exits. And not only that, Wario saves each coin you collect in his treasury, which he uses in the end to finally buy his own castle. As we've come to know from this series, Kitchen Island is also quite charming. Each world is themed after different food items or kitchen appliances, adding a lot of personality. Wario himself is also super expressive and adds a ton of charm. Design-wise, little of Mario remains here, as no familiar locations or enemies reappear. Wario Land also ditches the non-linear areas from Mario Land 2, instead focusing on more linear worlds that are explored one after another. Wario treads through a giant teapot mountain, a lava-filled stove, pirate ships, and more unique areas, such as an optional ice world that I didn't even immediately find on my first playthrough. During all of this, he's hunting down the all-new Sewer Pirates, a gang full of unique foes for Wario to beat up, including some crazy boss fights that are a huge step up from the prior 2 games, and actually provide cool mechanical challenges. They give the game its own charm and allow it to really set itself apart from Mario's adventure. While Wario Land really tries to experiment and tread some new ground, this doesn't always work out. The game remains rather easy until the end, and levels can get quite repetitive in its later portions, as the game neither introduces many new mechanics, nor plays into visual themes as much as Mario Land 2, causing levels to often feel samey after a while. And while bosses are very fun and varied, not all of them are as fun as they should have been, especially during the finale, as the genie can really screw you up if the RNG isn't in your favor. The soundtrack also feels like a step down from its predecessor, as there's much less variety in themes, and even less songs that truly stand out. At the end of Wario's fight with the genie and the pirate captain, the fortress is blown up, revealing the statue Wario has been looking for all this time. But just as he's so close to his riches, Mario snags it away from him and flies off. Here's where all those coins and treasures you've been collecting finally come into use, as Wario asks the genie for a wish, which is of course a nice mansion to call his own. The more collectibles you've racked up, the bigger and crazier Wario's house gets, ranging from a measly bird's house to him owning the entire planet if you've collected everything, and maxed out the coin counter, which is quite the achievement. In the end, Wario Land is a great new adventure and does a lot to truly cement itself as its own experience, far apart from the Mario games we've come to know. While it does fall over its own feet quite often, it's nonetheless a very fun and surprisingly replayable game. This is also the game that really started Wario's career in the Nintendo universe, as the Wario Land series would get many more titles that would end up with more and more critical acclaim. Wario would become a beloved mascot until long, and it's no wonder, as even here he's sprawling with personality and his own quirky charm. Despite boasting incredible sales numbers, making them some of the best-selling titles on the Game Boy, the Super Mario Land games never really left much of a lasting impact. Neither are they acknowledged much nowadays, nor has Nintendo ever given them any attention. But for those looking for a Mario experience they've never seen before, this is the perfect series to come to. Despite their age, all three titles are incredibly fun, and all of them do a lot to set themselves apart from their console counterparts. Super Mario Land experiments a whole bunch, especially in the visual department, and boasts many ideas the main series could only dream of. From magical worlds based on real countries to the depths of space or Mario's own robotic interior, the creativity is endless, and there's plenty of hidden secrets to find at every corner. So in conclusion, I think that not only are these some of the best games on the Game Boy, they're also easily Mario's most unique and curious adventures. And replaying each one for this video has been a real joy.